Okay, before we get into this, I need to say something. This video is not political. This video is history. And the history is genuinely fascinating, frequently hilarious, occasionally horrifying, and almost completely absent from everything you were ever taught in school. Because here is the thing that nobody tells you. The question of how to prevent or end an unwanted pregnancy is not a modern question. It is not a recent debate. It is not something humans started thinking about after the invention of the pill or the passing of any law. It is one of the oldest medical questions in recorded human history. Women have been asking it for as long as there have been women, and for thousands of years they found answers, sophisticated ones, documented ones, answers that worked, answers that were passed from mother to daughter, from midwife to patient, from physician to physician across centuries and civilizations. And then, most of that knowledge was systematically destroyed. That is the story we are telling today. Ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, the medieval world, we are going everywhere. And by the end of this video, you will understand that the history of contraception is not just medical history. It is the history of what happens when women's knowledge gets treated as dangerous. Let's start in Egypt, because Egypt, as always, is out here doing the most. The Ebers Papyrus is one of the oldest medical documents ever found. It dates to approximately 1550 BCE, and tucked inside its pages, between treatments for crocodile bites and instructions for eye infections, are contraceptive recipes, written down, documented, in a medical text. So the Egyptians were not whispering about this in back alleys. They were filing it in the official medical literature. So what did they actually use? Option 1, acacia tips fermented with honey, formed into a pessary and inserted vaginally. Now, I know what you're thinking, that sounds insane, but here is the part that should genuinely impress you. Acacia fermentation produces lactic acid. Lactic acid is a spermicide. It is still used in modern contraceptive gels today. The ancient Egyptians, working from centuries of accumulated empirical knowledge, had independently arrived at a chemically sound contraceptive method roughly 3,500 years before the pharmaceutical industry got there. Option 2, crocodile dung mixed with honey and sodium carbonate also formed into a pessary. I want to be fair to the Egyptians here. The acidic pH of the mixture may have had some spermicidal effect. This is what historians charitably suggest. The less charitable interpretation is that if someone told you your contraceptive involved crocodile dung, you might just decide to stay home, which would also prevent pregnancy. Option 3, wool soaked in various oils or resins placed at the cervix as a physical barrier. This is essentially the earliest diaphragm. It works on the same mechanical principle. The Egyptians had invented it 30,500 years ago. Egypt was not squeamish about this. Fertility and its management were understood as interconnected parts of the same medical reality. Women were not shamed for seeking solutions. The knowledge was not hidden. It was written in the official documents. Remember that fact. We're going to need it later. Before we leave the ancient Mediterranean world, we need to talk about silphium. Silphium was a plant that grew in a specific region of what is now Libya, around the ancient city of Cyrene. It was used across the ancient world as a seasoning, a medicine, and most significantly, as a contraceptive and abortifacient. It was so effective, so widely used, and so specifically associated with fertility management that it appeared on the coins of Cyrene. The seed pod of the silphium plant seed was stamped on currency. It was the city's primary export and most valuable product. Julius Caesar reportedly kept a significant stockpile of it in the Roman treasury. Ancient writers described it as working both to prevent pregnancy and to end an early one. And humans harvested it so aggressively, so relentlessly driven by the enormous demand for a plant that genuinely worked, that it went extinct, probably sometime around the 1st century CE. The last stock was reportedly given as a curiosity to Emperor Nero. We have lost it entirely. We cannot identify it with certainty. We cannot test it. We cannot know exactly how well it worked. Some historians believe the heart symbol, the one you put on Valentine's cards, originated as a drawing of the silphium seed pod, which appeared frequently on Cyrenian coins and in ancient art associated with love and sex. The most recognizable symbol of romantic love in modern culture may be derived from a contraceptive plant that humans used until they destroyed it completely. Let that sit for a second. Ancient Greece gave us democracy, philosophy, and Cyrannus of Ephesus, who wrote a medical text called Gynecology around 100 CE that is genuinely one of the most impressive documents in ancient medicine. Cyrannus understood the difference between contraception, which prevents conception, and an abortifacient, which ends an early pregnancy. He listed multiple methods for each. He described wool pessaries with various preparations, olive oil, pomegranate rind, and other substances as cervical barriers. He also recommended, and I want to be accurate here, that women jump up and down vigorously after sex 7 times while sneezing. To be clear, this does not work, but in a pre-microscope world where no one could see sperm, working backwards from the idea that getting them out quickly might help is at least logical reasoning, even if the conclusion is completely wrong. Queen Anne's lace, also known as wild carrot, was widely used across Greece and Rome. Women chewed the seeds after sex. Modern pharmacological research has confirmed that wild carrot seeds do interfere with progesterone synthesis and can inhibit implantation. It worked. Imperfectly, inconsistently, and at doses that were hard to calibrate, but it worked. And women across the ancient Mediterranean world knew this from centuries of observational data. Now, while women were developing this body of knowledge, what were men doing? Pliny the Elder, reliable as always, suggested that wearing a piece of mule's earwax as an amulet would prevent pregnancy. He also mentioned that touching a specific type of spider prevented conception, as did wearing the right testicle of a weasel tied around the body during sex. I want to be absolutely clear that none of these work. Pliny was writing the scientific literature of his time, which means for several centuries, mule earwax appeared in formal medical documents alongside methods that actually had contraceptive effects, and historians had to sort through all of it. This is, by the way, a pattern that runs through the entire history of this subject. The practical knowledge that women accumulated through observation sits alongside the complete nonsense that men wrote with total confidence, and both ended up in the same documents. In ancient Rome, abortion itself was not illegal. The legal framework around it was not about bodily autonomy. It was about property. A fetus was legally considered the property of the father because it was a potential heir. Terminating a pregnancy without a husband's consent was legally a property violation. This is a distinction worth understanding. The first recorded laws restricting abortion in Western history were not about protecting life. They were about a husband's right to his own heirs. And then came the medieval church, which had opinions, lots of opinions. The church's position on contraception and abortion evolved across centuries, and the theological history of it is genuinely complex. Thomas Aquinas argued that ensoulment happened at different points for male and female fetuses. Augustine had different views. The hardline position that collapsed contraception, abortion, and sexuality into a unified framework of sin took centuries to fully develop. But developed it did. And in medieval Europe, the women who held the practical knowledge of herbal contraception and early termination were increasingly the women who were accused of witchcraft. Pennyroyal, tansy, mugwort, savin juniper. These herbs appear in medieval herbal medicine texts. They also appear in witch trial records. Several of them contain compounds we now know cause uterine contractions. Several of them, in high doses, are also dangerous to the woman taking them. The Malleus Maleficarum, the witch hunter's manual published in 1486, specifically mentioned the ability to cause sterility and terminate pregnancies as evidence of witchcraft. The midwives who held this knowledge, who had developed it over generations, who knew the doses and the timing and the precautions, were targeted explicitly. Hildegard of Bingen, the remarkable 11th century abbess who wrote extensively on medicine and botany, described several plants with what she carefully termed womb-stimulating properties. She was a nun, she was a theologian, and she was still documenting this information because she understood that women's medical reality did not stop existing because the church found it inconvenient. The knowledge survived in fragments, in herbals, in women's networks, but it was underground now. It was dangerous to hold, dangerous to share, dangerous to be known for. Here is what this history actually shows. First, the knowledge was real. Women across Egypt, Greece, Rome, medieval Europe, the Islamic world, Mesoamerica, and China developed methods of fertility management that ranged from mechanically sound to chemically valid. They did this through centuries of observation, experimentation, and accumulated empirical data shared between women. Some of it worked very well. We know this because modern pharmacology has tested it. Second, the knowledge was taken, not forgotten, not naturally lost, taken. The targeting of midwives, the criminalization of herbal knowledge, the burning of women who were known to provide these services. These are not metaphors. They are historical events with documented records. Third, the gap between what wealthy women could access and what poor women could manage runs through every single civilization we looked at. Wealthy women had physicians. Poor women had folk remedies. Wealthy women could afford privacy. Poor women could not. This disparity is ancient, and it is consistent. We did not start from nothing and build up. We started from something sophisticated, lost large portions of it through deliberate suppression, and have spent the last century trying to reconstruct it through formal medicine. The women who developed that knowledge did not get credit. They did not get statues. They did not get chapters in history textbooks. Cleopatra had access to contraceptive knowledge her physicians had refined over centuries. A medieval peasant woman had fragments of that knowledge filtered through generations of suppression, copied into illegal herbals, and passed in whispers at risk to her life. And when you look at the full sweep of this history, the Egypt that filed contraceptive recipes in official medical documents, the silphium that was so effective humans drove it to extinction, the Serranis who bothered to write everything down, the midwives who kept the knowledge alive when the church tried to end it, what you are looking at is not a gap in human knowledge. You are looking at knowledge that existed, that was extensive, that worked, and that was treated as the most dangerous thing a woman could have. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.